Hello everyone, it's Dudley, and I'm back again with another tutorial on how to build programs in Vizzy. In the last video, we talked about how each of the different command blocks worked and how to connect blocks together to build bigger programs. And if you watched the first video and took a shot at the challenge assignment to get a rocket into orbit only using Vizzy, then you should be pretty comfortable at this point putting together Vizzy code. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about loops, what they are, how to use them. First, we'll take a look at each of the different types of loops and break down what they do and how they behave, and then we'll look at a few examples of how to use them. Then we'll talk about nesting loops and putting them together into larger pieces of program. The simplest and one of the most common loops you're going to use is called the while loop. Now, every loop's behavior can be described using it in a sentence, and for a while loop, it behaves like this. While x is true, do y. This means that so long as x, your input, is true, the loop will continue to cycle through y forever, the output. Loops, like the rest of Vizzy, read from top to bottom sequentially, but once you get to the bottom of a loop, the bottom bar there, you go back to the top of the loop and reevaluate if the loop's condition is still true. So the loop runs, and if the condition that enables it becomes false, the loop will finish that cycle, then go back to the top, see it's false, and then move on to the next thing after the loop. Let's build a quick demonstration. We'll make a while loop and set its input to be throttle is equal to 0. That means so long as I don't change my throttle, the loop will be true and it will continue to run. Inside the loop, let's add a 5-second wait block and then a display block with some text in it. Now, so long as my throttle is equal to 0, the loop will display the text on the screen every 5 seconds. Let's add another wait block with some different text and another display. Then test it out on the launchpad. The next kind of loop that we can use is called a repeat loop. This loop will repeat a set number of times regardless of any input conditions. There's not much more to it than that. There aren't any input conditions that make it true or false, disabled or enabled, and the number of the cycles is always the same as what you set it to every time. They're useful if you need to repeat the same set of actions a certain number of times within a code, but beyond that there's not a whole lot used for them. Not as much as their big brother, the for loop. The for loop acts similarly to the repeat loop, but gives you the ability to use the cycle you're on as an argument for blocks within the loop. You can also select the range of cycles and the number of steps per cycle. For instance, I can go from 0 to 5 by increments of 1, or from 10 to 0 by increments of -1, or from 0 to 100 by increments of 5. One great and simple example of how to use a for loop is a countdown timer. We can have the loop wait for 1 second, then display the text t- and join it with the cycle number. Now when we run this timer from 10 to 0 by -1, it'll count down from 10 to 0 before continuing with the code. The last type of loop we'll cover in this video isn't really a loop, but they are extremely useful and make up a lot of the logic in most programs. If-else statements. If-else statements behave like this. If X condition is true, do Y, else do Z. You could do more than just one if-else statement. You could include the else-if command in there as well to have more than one set of options to execute. When using else-if statements, they behave more like this. If A is true, then do X, else if B is true, then do Y, else do Z. Essentially, the if and else-if statements will run the blocks within them if specific sets of instructions are true, and the else statement will run if all the other statements are false. Here's an example of an if-else statement in use. Let's use a wait block with the condition being that activation group 1 is true. Then we'll include the if loop with the condition craft is grounded, then display the text we're on the ground. Then we'll add an else if loop if craft altitude is less than 1,000 meters, and then we'll display the text within that loop we are close to the ground. Then add an else loop with the display text we are high up. Let's try it out. If we enable activation group 1 in each of these 3 situations, the program should respond differently. One thing you may have noticed is that once the program is complete, it stops running altogether. which is often not what we want to happen. One way we can stop our program from doing this is to nest our code within a loop. Let's take a look again at our if-else statement we just made. Once activation group 1 is enabled and the code has outputted the respective text, it ends and it can't run again. Now let's take a while loop and put a true block in it so that our code will run forever, and place our existing code inside it. Let's also add a command to disable activation group 1 once at the end of the loop so it will wait again until we enable it. Now we can run our code forever, since the while loop will go back to the top every time. Let's see how it looks now. There is one more thing you need to be careful with when working in loops. Sometimes, depending on the program you're writing, you can get into a situation where you have a while loop that you can't break out of, effectively freezing your program. This is where a break block comes into play. By putting a break block in your loops, usually in an if-else statement as a sort of error response, you can break out of loops and prevent your program from being stuck. Breaks can also be used when you want to end a loop after a given set of specific conditions are satisfied other than the conditions that got you into the loop in the first place. That about covers it for loops. There's a lot you can do with them, and they're what allows you to structure your code in specific ways. Last video, the assignment was to build a program to launch a rocket into orbit, and for this video, the challenge assignment is to build a program that runs a status board on our rocket. These status lights need to be turned on and off depending on what the rocket is doing. Here's a hint for how to complete the assignment. You'll want to nest several if statements within a while loop to get the status board to continue to update throughout the mission. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and good luck on the challenge. I will see you in the next video.